you've been looking quite a lot at consolation in the ancient world. What in the world does consolation actually mean? It's not a word that we use every day, is it?
Yeah. No, thanks, Daniel. It's a good point. Sort of, what does consolation mean? And I think today it carries quite negative connotations, doesn't it? I mean, we were talking a bit at the top about sport, and you quite often hear of a consolation prize. So if someone's not done very well in an event, and or a consolation goal, maybe if a team are 3-0 down and they manage to get one back just for the end of time, it's sometimes a consolation. It's something sort of quite weak. I mean, it's sort of back end of a athletic season after the Olympics. You hear commentators saying, "Oh, if someone does well, then it's a consolation if they've not managed to get a medal." So I mean, that's only sort of you sometimes hear people say, "Oh, if it's any consolation," and sometimes it isn't much of a consolation. So but I mean, I do some, I think, quite careful work in the start of the research that I've carried out and on how we might define consolation. And I mean, I try and sort of understand it as a more robust concept. I mean, I think I see sort of 3 like distinct stages in what consolation might be generally. I mean, not just in the New Testament, but generally. I mean, I think there is this like first phase of just sympathy, being with someone in a situation that's difficult. Just that realization that something's gone wrong and sitting with someone in that. But then I mean, I think there probably does come a time where that sort of, you can only sympathize so long, and once maybe circumstances have settled a little bit, then you can move to like comforting someone and saying, like, okay, now's the time to take courage in this situation. Circumstances are difficult, but can we maybe consider things a little bit differently, perhaps? And then the final stage is really sort of like encouraging someone to, I mean, maybe not entirely look beyond their suffering. Sort of maybe still be mindful that the things are difficult, but to try and look past the source of grief to a more enduring or form of joy. So I think consolation sort of involves all of those stages. It is sort of that sort of sympathizing when something's gone wrong, but it is also trying to like broadly move someone away from something sort of grief inducing to something sort of more joyful and hopeful. Don't know if that makes it. I don't know how helpful that is, but
so sort of it's more than one so the concept covers more than one idea. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. I mean, granted, I define it quite generously, I think, and some people say, "Oh, is that really consolation?" But it is, and it's often, I often think of it as presence in absence as well. When maybe you yourself are absent from a situation, from someone, you can try and be present with them in writing a letter that conveys some like emotional goodwill and understanding, or if someone is no longer around, or if money has disappeared, then trying to make it present again is that thing or that object present again is, I think, at the heart of what consolation is.
And there's also in Greek there's not just one word that talks about consolation. Isn't that the case?
And I think that would be interesting for our listeners, won't it? It's now the time to maybe talk a little bit about sort of parakaleo, that Greek word, which comes up a lot in Paul, but not exclusively in Paul. There's I don't know how much to say or not to say. Stop me if I'm go on too long.
The point is to just I think it will be good to like explain a little bit what these like words mean, because like Parakaleo have multiple range of translations, and they've been translating many different ways in Paul, just in Paul, but also in the world, and the noun as well, paraklesis, parakletos, as well, which is very prominent in John, for example.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean there are times where yes, I mean the verb's very common, the parakaleo, and then I mean the noun paraklesis is also comes up a little bit, and then absolutely. I mean John has this notion of the in John's Gospel it is the Holy Spirit who is the parakletos, and maybe at the end we might think about how to translate that. I've got a few ideas which are hardly too surprising, but I mean parakaleo comes up a lot, and there are times where it does just mean like to encourage or exhort, or even just to like ask for something. I mean, I only learned this a couple of months ago when I was out in Greece, and I did some work on sort of modern Greek, and I'm keeping it up on Duolingo actually. But when a Greek person says please, they say parakaleo, which is still it's the same word which is used. So they're saying like please, I ask you. But then I mean, and I've probably argued for this about as much as anyone has, and I've been, I think, rightly in a few places critiqued for it by reviewers. But I think there are certainly a number of places where parakaleo unmistakably means something like console, particularly when there is this context of grief. You've got to look at sort of the semantic field around a particular verb, and there are times where there's language of affliction or grief, and parakaleo comes in. I think it's quite reasonable there to translate it as something to do with consoling or comforting. But it can have this sort of broader, plainer sense, and sometimes it is clearly like exhorting someone where when there isn't really a source of grief, and it's I mean arguably you could say that's the case at the end of Hebrews. I think people have often read it in that way, that these are just sort of like universal encouragements to keep going in the faith.
But exhortation, the way Parakaleo do exhortation, is not just about like saying there's something wrong with here, you have to do it in a different way. That's not exactly the meaning of the word, is it? Or what do you think?
No, that's a good point actually. It's rare that there's rebuke in Parakaleo. I mean there are other verbs in the New Testament which get used for sort of like reproaching someone, or I mean not that much in Paul occasionally. I mean again those are quite unusual words that only appear a handful of times in the New Testament. But I think Parakaleo does tend to be a bit gentler, softer.
Even though we sometimes translate it exhort.
But it all depends on context, and there are certainly places where it does just straightforwardly mean to encourage someone. I mean it quite often happens at the sort of the turn of letters in Paul. You quite often have a sort of a more doctrinal first half, and then a sort of a more sort of ethical outworking in the second half. I mean that's certainly true in Ephesians. I think you sort of have this sort of all this theologizing about the cosmic Christ, but then you have sort of like some exaltation that comes from that, and Paul is says like when it's a sort of I encourage or I exhort, it's I think sort of encouraging people to keep going in that, but it's rare there that there's sort of any grief at all, or but there are some passages which we might think about later in the episode, I guess, where it seems like there's a lot of grief there, and and so consolation, comforting is more appropriate.
Yeah. So just before we move on to the other question, I wanted to say, so are there other words than sort of like the parakaleo, paraklesis kind of like words that convey some of the same ideas as well?
Thank you for watching this clip. If you enjoyed it, you can find another one by clicking just over here. Or if you want to watch the full episode and dive a step deeper, you can find a link in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.